it's a pleasure to be here with the OR Group, Tony and Steven here in Vancouver on MIF and VRIC weekend. It's always a great place to be, January in Vancouver.
You bet. Nice to escape Toronto's winter. I don't know. I don't know if you can say that coming from Florida, Rob, but see lots of friends yesterday. Good times, talking business. Good to be here with Tony and you.
Thank you. It's a little chilly. It's a little colder than Miami, although we've had a cold spell lately, but 30 for me is extremely cold. But let's talk about copper in Canada. I think that's the main topic of today's conversation. And the different provinces of Canada. So we have BC, we have Ontario. What is the main, difference, between the provinces of Canada from a mining standpoint?
Tony, want me to take it away?
Go ahead.
Start off? Well, I mean, Canada, I've been sort of going back and forth on what Canada is to the mining industry as of late. I mean, historically, Canada is a major producer of metals of all sorts, copper included. As of the last 10 years, I think we've lost our luster, but I think we're about to pivot. And I think we talked about that yesterday. Then I think the spark, which is going to occur down south of the border, is really going to force us to get our act together. So I think it's a counter-cyclical bet to bet on Canada, but it's a big, big place, as you say. We got Tony out on the west coast in BC, which has been a huge historical copper producer, and then of course XXIX out on the east coast, both in Quebec and Ontario, which there are smaller scale deposits, less history of mining, and I think that sort of speaks to, again, aside from the history of it, there's a huge disparity between the provinces. Whether you're in British Columbia, which now has an NDP government, and coming some changes to the mining code, which people are questioning. I think that I think they'll do the right thing, because mining, whether it's coal or whatever they're mining in BC, is so important to the economy here, and things are changing in Ontario and Quebec. We've got I guess conservative governments in both Ontario and Quebec now. But I think they've been struggling too with permitting. But I do think there's going to be a reawakening to the importance of mining. The provinces right now, I think, are joining together to, quote unquote, combat what these tariffs that's taking all the headlines. And I think that's perhaps forcing these guys to become more cohesive and have more sensible plans to work together, as opposed to be independent, because the provinces are independent. And have very different approaches to mining development.
So the key thing to understand about Canada in terms of mining permitting is that the permitting is at the level of the province as far as permits to drill and stuff like that. But when you actually build a mine, it's at the federal level.
Well, yeah. So it's again the mineral rights belong to the province, but once you hit a certain threshold, and I believe it's the 5,000 ton a day, then you need federal permit.
Okay.
So that's the threshold.
But the province agrees with it. The feds pretty much go with it as well.
Okay, so if the province agrees, you'll get the permits on a federal level.
Yeah, and there's 300 different First Nations in BC. I think in Canada there's 600, and I think every First Nation should be looked at little individual governments. Mm-hmm. So there's 300 different governments within BC, and how does that company get along with those little individual governments and communities? I think that's a good thing to look at. And, it's not one broad stroke. It's not this place didn't work, so this place isn't, or this place is, so this place is. I think you have to look at those guys' individual relationships, and I can't speak to XXIX, but we've done a really fabulous job at American Eagle Gold. Half of our guys and girls that work at our property are from the LBN Nation. And I've been to the site, I've been to the communities, and what I hear is we want more people to move to our towns. We want people to move back from Prince George, Kelowna, Vancouver to the LBN Nation. And the only way that's going to happen is with jobs, money, prosperity, hospitals, education, and you need some sort of economic boom. And I've flown over the trees there. First of all, like all the forestry is leaving. And even if you do have forestry, they're all getting killed by these bugs there.
The beetles.
We flew over there. It's crazy. Half the trees are dead. So where's the economic boom coming from? It's coming from mining, and I think they're open to it as long as it doesn't, affect fish, their communities, etc. So they're very receptive. We work very closely with them.
I think one of the nuances when you're dealing with different layers of government, you could be fully permitted at the province and the federal level, but if you don't have permission from the First Nations, you basically can't move forward, or you're fighting an uphill battle. So I mean, that's one of the nuances. So like, you can go through the entire permitting regime at both the federal and the province, but if you don't have good relationships with the First Nations, you're probably not going anywhere. And I think, unfortunately, there's an inherent or baked in largely historical distrust between the government and the First Nations, and oftentimes industry gets wrapped up in there. I think the attitudes have long since changed, and it's not just about altruism, it's about doing good business and making sure that the communities with which you operate benefit reasonably. I mean, if you've got a gold mine on your back step, your community deserves to benefit through not just the infrastructure, but schools, community centers, and all those other things that come into play. I mean, that's speaking to northern Ontario, northern Quebec. You drive from Timmins to Val d'Or, that wonderful gold structure there. It's vibrant. You've got all sorts of businesses, schools, communities that otherwise would not have been there. And so I think that's how you have to approach it now. That's the conversation you need to have with the First Nations. You have to do it directly, like as Tony was saying, is develop relationships. Communication is key. Managing expectations, and I think managing expectations at the First Nations level, but also the other communities as well. Let's not forget about them. XXIX operates proximate to the community of Chappé. The Chappé has been there for 50 years. That was, or more than that now, but that was the raison d'etre for that mine, and we have to work very closely with them. They are, just like Tony was saying, in British Columbia, there, certainly I won't say there's no industry there. There's lots of smaller businesses, but on the large, if you take out the extractive industries, which includes forestry and of course mining, which I think would be the bigger part, it's really hard to attract and retain the young people, right? And so I think it's they're more likely to go to Montreal, Quebec City, Toronto. So I think
Just like everyone else.
Well, sure. I mean, that's the sort of the trend. But frankly, I mean, I think that trend could reverse. I mean, a lot of people are frustrated in cities. You look at Toronto and Vancouver, where we are, beautiful places, lots of action, lots of restaurants, but the cost of living
is a real problem.
Cost of living is going higher, and so that's moving the marginal person out and out. And Canada does have such an amazing, environment. And when I say environment, just landscape. I mean, it's a beautiful country if you exit the concrete jungles of
Gorgeous
Toronto.
country, my God, especially in the summer.
So if you can give people jobs, right? Like maybe when you're in your early 20s, you want to be in the cities and go to the hot bars, but eventually, you get married, you got kids, and you realize that's just not as interesting as it once was to some people. And so, like, why not go and live in Chappé, where you've got snowmobiling, in the winter, and golf in the summer, and like raise a family in a smaller.
It's actually a great point, because in the mining industry, you could get the wages that you'd get in the city, but your cost of living is half or a third of what would be in the city. So it can really raise the quality of people's lives.
Well, totally. When you factor in the wages we pay in our industry,
right,
are very high, and your cost of living can be very low. So you can live like a king in these smaller towns.
In Chappé.
Live like a king,
So let's talk about the Thunder Bay North area, and then we'll talk about the Babine. So Thunder Bay North, it doesn't. I didn't know it as a copper area, of Canada really, but I learned more about, the project, the new project that you have, in the XXIX company. And it has a good history to it. So it was, discovered in the 60s, I think. There was a lot of work done in the 70s. It was an operating mine for a period of time, and then it kind of went dormant the last 20 years or so. So tell us about copper in Thunder Bay.
Copper in Thunder Bay is rare and unique. In copper in Thunder Bay, more specifically, a little bit north in Pickle Lake. I mean, Pickle Lake, for those who aren't very familiar with it, is the same geologic province as Red Lake, which is its more famous cousin, but it's the same rocks, extends about 200 kilometers to the west. And the same is true of Pickle Lake. Now, there's no mining in Pickle Lake today, but there was. It was a very famous camp with the Golden Patricia, the Central Patricia. Newmont has an asset there, I forgot the name. And now, of course, Newmont also just sold its Musselwhite, which is in the same camp. Musselwhite's now, or I don't know if it's closed yet, but Orla purchased it. So it and then just immediately on our adjacent to our eastern boundary, we got the Pickled Crow, which is Firefly's asset, which has a 3 to 4 million ounce gold asset on our core. So we are literally surrounded by gold, former producing gold mines and gold resources. We are very much in gold country, and in the middle of it, you got this copper nickel PGE magmatic deposit, which is unique. And we're, to be honest with you, the origins of it. I wouldn't be the right guy to answer that first, but like
it's complicated.
Even our team is trying to figure it out. And I was talking to another guy have a lot of respect for. I think the Kennerland guys.
Yeah.
And I talked to Zach. Yesterday I talk to him every now and then, and he says he's working on something that's maybe 100 kilometers to our south that sort of looks and smells a lot like what Thierry is, and so maybe it works on a north-south corridor. I mean, look, you'd have to ask Zach about that.
Look at the highway. The highway. The last stop on the highway goes to Pickle Lake, and that's because of the copper history. It's got the infrastructure, which is key. You drive right there.
So, and that's really interesting because all the rail and roads followed the mines
Typically.
a long time ago. Let's talk about...
Or maybe it's the inverse, Rob. Like, cause when they were cutting these, they were going east-west wherever they were going, and they were cutting the line. So it's all about access to...
The access.
They were there, right?
Yeah,
So they were cutting the line through the bush, and they'd, clear the area, and, or they'd kick a rock, and, that's how... So it wasn't the rail that followed the mines. I think it was the mines that followed the rail. Okay. Which speaks to... opening up the north. It's particularly in Ontario. I mean, huge. Like, I think British Columbia has done a wonderful job. Like, there's actual infrastructure. There's mines. That's opened up the north there. And Quebec's done a wonderful job, and that was led by the hydroelectric dams in the 70s. So they've developed up there. But Ontario, like I think, as you said, like Thunder Bay is kind of the end of the road. Obviously, it's a big sort of north or east-west sort of border there. But let's talk about the Ring of Fire, not to get too distracted, but. If we were to build a road up there, I think you'd just find deposits left, right, and center. If you were to build a road up there, you'd drop our exploration costs by, let's just say 50%, maybe at least, which allows us to double the steel in the ground. You double the steel in the ground, you drastically increase your ability to make discoveries at lower cost. So, it's all about the infrastructure.
Tony, let's talk about young people in mining. A big challenge the sector has is attracting young talent, and there's a brain drain that's gone on for the last 20 years or so. How can we attract more young people to be interested in the mining sector and take a job in this industry?
It's a really good question. It's something that Steve and I think about all the time. Like, we started the Young Mining Scholarship Fund, which is probably the thing that I'm most proud of that we've done.
Totally.
We started with $12,000. Ore Group and I'm Gold started with $12,000, and this year we're giving almost $250,000 away. But a good example is, not only is it hard to get people into the mining sector, once they graduate, a good example is a guy named Jonah. He graduated from Queens, one of the top guys there. Top guy in mining geology or mining engineering. He didn't even want to stay in mining. He went to Accenture. And it took Mark Bristow to personally call him on his cell phone to convince him to join mining. So we kept him in. And even from the Ore Group, it's the toughest thing is finding someone that wants to run a mining company. So who's willing to take that risk? Who doesn't want to have the luxury of having a 9-to-5 job? So that's a really big problem that I think that we're having, and then we're going to continue to have. And how we solve that, I don't know, but. I think, I said in my presentation yesterday, everyone wants to get rich quickly, everyone wants a solution quickly, but I think you have to start in the high school level, tell people why mining is great, and then keep them in there. You want the best people to join the mining industry, you want the best people to graduate from them, and make sure that they have jobs at those big companies.
Yeah, we need more mines, because if you think about how the industry has evolved, throughout the last, I would say a couple hundred years essentially, in North America, is your dad, worked in a mine, and then you got interested in rocks, and then you worked in a mine, and et cetera, et cetera. It got passed down through the family. So when your father or your mom is not in the mining industry, then why are you going to be in it?
Like, it's crazy. It's like, there's a girl named Romy Doan, and shout out to Romy. She won the I Am Gold scholarship. It was our first scholarship, you remember? And she got a full-time job at I Am Gold. Super smart girl. And I asked her, I go, what brought you into mining? Like, She goes, well, I did like a trip to a mine when I was in high school. She goes, otherwise I would have never known about it. And when I was in high school, nobody ever talked about mining. I got into it because my uncle, who actually convinced us to get NAC, he was in mining. So I think unless you're from a small town or you're surrounded from people in mining, it's something that you don't really think about.
Oh, it's true.
Challenge.
I came in through my father. My father,
Yeah, your
was in
father.
the industry. That's how we got the bug. And then, my brother, the same. I mean, it's sort of, you have to be exposed to it to be interested in it in a way. I think part of the problem is the narrative. I mean, there's a lot of negative.
Yeah, how do we switch the narrative?
Excitement, discoveries. Like,
Discoveries.
we need excitement. We need, the fear and the negative to, and we need greed to come back, and not greed in a bad way, right? But
Not greed in a bad way, just a little sprinkle of greed.
Greed that people make money, and it's exciting. It's like
Speaking of greed, did you see the Trump meme coin is 32 billion market cap?
I think, look, obviously to have the American president behind that sort of stuff it's hard to go against that momentum. But look, I think we all know how that's eventually going to end, or at least I have a pretty good indication of that sort of, it's just a speculative hot potato.
I've got a bit of optimism both for Canada with the change that could occur in the government in 2025, and I have some optimism for the U.S. that Trump is going to bring manufacturing and reshore the supply chain of metals a bit more to North America, and that will be a very positive tailwind for the mining industry. So let's keep our fingers crossed that will bring some better optics for the industry. I want to talk about South 32 and their $30 million investment in American Eagle Gold. I think this is really important, and I think it got some headlines for a few days. And then I think it's kind of been overshadowed by various other news in the sector the last month. So let's get back to that. And why did this major mining company write such a big check in your company?
They wanted access to Canada. They wanted to be in safe jurisdictions. I think we talk about the challenges of Canada. I think what permitting takes. Let's say an extra 2 years versus a country like Suriname or Peru. But in the end, if you have a mine, you're not going to lose it. And a company like South 32 and Teck or BHP, they're only going to develop mines that are going to be around for 50 years. So those 2 years within the 50 is 4%. It doesn't really make a big difference for them. So they wanted some access to Canada. And look, they told me, and they can watch this video, they said, this was our number one target in the whole country for Porphyry.
Really?
And that's what they told me.
Well, I think your grades set yourself apart from the other 6, call it half dozen porphyries in British Columbia. I think you're unique because you're not in the mountains. You've got low-lying elevation. You can drive a car to it. You've got a near-surface zone, which pays back capital, which is absolutely key. I mean, a lot of the porphyries out there, we're seeing some eye-popping stuff. And I'll give a shout-out to the guys. Joy, A-Mark yesterday, which, I'm so happy for Bob Dickens. Not that I need to be happy for Bob Dickens.
Bob's amazing.
Bob's done amazing, but I got to say, shout-out to Bob. Since we're shouting out to people, that guy's one of the hardest working guy in the industry. I'm very happy to see his success. I believe he's in the Hall of Fame. If he's not, he certainly will be. But he was out at the conference before me, yesterday, working the floor, shaking hands, talking the phones, and then he was there after me, and he's been around for a lot longer than me. So he deserves all the success he has, and that's in the Babine district too. So we're neighbors, we're contiguous, that's a little bit north, but that's great for the idea. But I get that's one hole. So they've got some work to do there. They're going to get that work done. But outside of that, what that may be one day, it'll take some time to catch up to what NAC is today. Because we got 3 years into this thing. We understand the discovery's been made, right?
So,
we
2 discoveries.
2 discoveries. Well, yeah, 2 discoveries, but approximately. But I think that's eventually we're going to form that to be one single thing. But it just continues to grow. So NAC has so many positives that set us apart from other maybe porphyry discoveries. I mean, obviously that there's some stuff happening down in Idaho, which is exciting, but they don't have really a handle on it like we have a handle on NAC. Obviously, Joy looks incredible, but they just don't have a handle on it yet. So, and not to say that they won't, but NAC does have a handle on it. We still have work to do.
You still got some more work to do.
We got the work to do. We're not there yet. Don't get me wrong, but we're ahead of the curve here, and we have a better view on it, and we're just really well financed. The structure is clean, where we don't really have any calls on it. We have equity
Warrants
shareholders.
getting blown out next week.
Yeah, we had some softness. Obviously, we had some softness these past few weeks, but that's largely it's maybe a few reasons. But we had all of our warrants come off on American Eagle, and as of January 23rd, there are no more warrants, which is great. So that cleans up the cap structure, and Tony and the team and Charlie are going to be out there drilling 30,000 meters this year. So I mean, it's got we're going to be back. There's no question.
We're at a buck. We top ticked at $1.07, I think, in December. If you look at our company, we're in better space ever. So to get to $1.07, we drilled historically 30,000 meters. We had about $7 million in the bank. We had one company on our registry, and now we have two companies on our registry. We have almost $40 million. If you give the tax credit, probably $50 million to spend, and then we actually have 30,000 meters to model off. And next year, we're going to drill more meters than we ever drilled before in 3 years combined. That got us to that 140 million market cap. So if you're going to bet on any company, it's probably should be us.
I think that's an important point you just made. 30,000 meters in total throughout the history of the entire NAC project. That's not a lot for a porphyry project. That's actually a pittance, in the grand scheme of things. These porphyry deposits take a couple 100,000 meters to really fully work out. So there's definitely a lot of room to grow. Let's just talk very briefly about some of the target areas and when you're going to put out the plan for 2025.
Plan for 2025, probably going to go out mid-February. 30,000 meters. Going to have 3 rigs when we're really churning at a NAC, and I think the big focus will be on the north. I talked to South 32. I think one of the reasons why the stock went down, South 32 invested, and people are looking for that 5x gain, and they think they must know something. They must know some assays or something, which they didn't. They're a very buttoned up company. They're very straightforward, and they didn't buy it for the results in hand. They bought it for where they think it can be. It can definitely be a mine. And so I think when we didn't show, I think those 2% over 500 meter intervals, I think
2%.
That'd be nice.
We're really raising the bar.
I read the boards. That's what I'm seeing, and I'm like, guys, temper your expectations. And I think there is a sell, so there's a rotation out of the fast money, which scares a lot of people. They see red on the screen. I got called by this geologist. My father introduced me and sent me an email, and this geologist who's run a bunch of companies goes, these results look great. And we talked to South 32 yesterday. They're like,
They're great results.
The results look great. We have 2 drill holes in this new discovery, and we just need another pierce point so we can go and attack it. So
more than calling it another discovery, what to me it says that system is open, and that porphyry stock, which we promotionally call the porphyry or the blue sky donut.
Yeah.
I mean, that's open for business. And we've even had holes in and around the south, curl. So we want to walk around that thing. And I think now that we have a strong treasury, which is fantastic, allows us to take some risk. American Eagle in 2023 and 2024 we're still going to manage our risk, but now we can afford to take more risk because we no longer have to live or die on any one particular drill hole. And as you say, these porphyries take a lot of time and money to build out. And Tony and his team have done a wonderful job of making sure that we're in a good position to test this thing. I want to see if this is tier 1, right? It has that potential.
Yeah, you've got enough.
We got to drill it.
Yeah, I think American Eagle at this point has enough capital to fully test NAC. By the end of next year, we'll know if this thing is really going to
give us 2 years.
Yeah,
Okay,
2
so
years.
give us 2 years, and then if we really wanted to go balls to the wall, excuse my language, and deploy all that capital, in the next 2 years. If it's there, we'll find it.
Yeah.
if it's there, I was talking to Neil the other day. We had to shut down our camp, unfortunately. Ken 4 left, but if it's there, we will never stop drilling. We will never stop drilling.
Let's talk about the Thierry project in Ontario, because I think this is an exciting one for 2025, and this is why I made it a top pick in my CU.ca stock picking contest, because I think 11, 12 cents for the share price, and you look at the Opimiska Foundation for the company. I think that backstops a 30 million market cap, and now you have all the upside in Ontario. So let's talk about the plans there. You got the K1 zone, which is the near surface open pit. You got the K2, which is the much higher grade but deeper zone. And then you've got this trend going from the east to the west, and you've got a lot of room in the middle. So, what's the plan for for the year at K1 and K2?
Well, the K2 actually, they both start right at surface and
Okay.
they go down. The underground, the so-called open pit deposit hasn't been tested at depth. It may go down there. The origination of that is that they put the underground deposit into production. That's what they were mining back in the 70s, and they discovered, if you will, the lower grade deposit, which is 4 kilometers to the east, to blend the ore so they could feed the mill, because they overbuilt the mill at the time. And that's ultimately why the mine shut down. And that's the explanation why there are these two historic deposits right by each other. They were after the high grade. We're certainly interested in the high grade. We got about 25 million tons at 1.6 copper, over 2% copper equivalent if you include the other metals. But we're working on that metallurgy there, so we're just really underwriting it based on the copper. So what's our plan? Our plan is really to focus on the lower hanging fruit first, which is to expand the open pit deposit, as we define it, to the east, because that's where we think we can get scale, because you got 25 million tons of 1.6. That's excellent, right? But is that enough to justify the capex for a mill? Let's just say no, it's not. In fact, no, it's not. You need scale. You want base metal projects. You need multi-decade. You need, to get a mill. Starting point of the mill is 10, 15,000 tons, right? You can't, so that's where we think we can grow tons, significant tons on the open pit deposit. Drill it out. It's wide open. That 54 million tons at 0.4 goes to 150 meters, whereas Opemiska goes to 450 meters, right? So, and then we drilled underneath that 150, and we hit 171 meters, at nearly a percent copper equivalent, 220 meters at 0.7 or 0.3, like really nice widths. Looks like it's getting wider. Looks like the copper seems to be getting higher grade, deeper. So it definitely justifies and has the potential to get bigger quicker. And and the geology is relative to Opemiska, where you've seen it twists and turns, and we're still trying to figure out the orientation of some of the veins after 1 million meters of drilling. Whereas the orientation here is just it's east-west. It's simple and it's stacked. And then in between the stacks, we definitely get disseminated mineralization. In fact, we did resampling of historic core that we found on site, and they weren't even cutting it and sending it to the lab. So we cut the core, assayed it, and it carries. So it's like it's stacked veins with a little bit of carry juice, if you will, in between there. So we think that's where we're going to get the tons. That's where we have the potential to take that 50 million tons, turn it into 100, maybe more. But let's try and aim for 100 first. We think it has that potential. Then shortly thereafter, we're going to attack the underground deposit, which is everybody loves grade. Right,
Yeah.
so if we can take that 25 million tons and turn it into, I don't know, I don't want to say these numbers because I'm just guessing at the end of the day, but it's open, it's not closed off, because basically the mill shut down and they left. And typically these styles of deposits, you're not going to drill them out, for 10, 20 years. So there's definitely more going on there. And as you say, in between, the K1 and the K2, they're right on strike to each other, right? The geology runs east-west, they're right on strike to each other. This area here, the 4 kilometers, just hasn't been drilled. That's blue sky. Now we have geophysics. Geophysics, doesn't always work, but it's a nice tool. We're going
It
to
seems
go in
like
there and test
the
it.
mag worked well there, back in the 60s and 70s. It found like the 4 main zones, right?
Yeah, the mag, the mag is a helpful tool, doesn't always indicate deposits. You got to layer on the IP. In fact, we have I think it's a 200 kilometer IP
Wow.
program that we're planning right now. Huge. So that's the first step, is do this big IP, cut those lines, help us target, get a better view on what the local deposits, the K1 and the K2, understand those better locally with sort of more modern stuff, and then see if we see other similar signatures in between and around. And then of course there's the south, what we call the J and the J and the G zone. That just sort of indicate the whole area is pregnant. There's another 50 million tons, again, it's historic. We know much less about it, it's not nearly as well understood, but it just says to us, we're in a very fertile system here. So there's the ability to build tons. That's what we need to do at Thierry, is build tons. Okay, so it's lower grade than Opemiska, but it's on par with...
Still high grade.
It's good grade, it's excellent grade, but in order, you either need like super grade, to justify your smaller project, or you need, good grade, but you need a lot of it.
You need a lot
and
of
so
it.
we see the potential to grow Thierry to a lot of it.
XIXX to me, I'm on the board, probably a little bit biased, but look, is it going to be one of those crazy volume stocks? No, but I almost call it like a blue chip of junior exploration. Like I don't see it going much lower. It's got two of the three highest grade, biggest deposits in Canada. Everyone wants copper, and we've done a lot of great things at the ore group. I think one thing that we do have to work on is getting the institutions and getting those big names behind us. The Freelands, the McEwens. And I think once that happens, I think there'll be a big turn. Because if you look at XXIX versus Foran, not a big difference from when Foran started. They went from 10 cents to $4. And I think we need the Prem Wattses of the world to maybe invest.
We need a spark. I think that's where we are from being the high volume. Look, we have the potential to be that high volume stock. We need our day in the sun. And there needs to be a catalyst. It could be a drill hole, it could be a significant investment from a big name person or a big name, strategic, which, both of which, are being managed, let's just say. And so I think that to me is inevitable before we get a very recognizable, call it entity or individual, to support us, because the value is there totally when you look at our peers. The upside is there. We've shown the ability to finance our activities and attract strategics. We're not just blowing smoke. I mean, Tony's done 2 deals, and look, we're all out of the same office. I'm the chairman of American Eagle. We've done deals with 6 or 7 major mining companies. In addition to financing ourselves through passing the hat around Toronto and Vancouver, retail brokers, and then the funds too, but also the institutions too. I think like those groups, for example, American Eagle is not really an institutional name, believe it or not, and either is XXIX. You sort of have to pass that 100 million mark threshold. Neither have really done, like XXX has really done a financing since 2021.
It's not.
That's a long time.
It's not the size. I see a lot of these companies and they're covered. Look, everybody wants to be paid, and I think people should be paid. But if you don't do a financing, you don't pay.
You can't pay everyone and keep your share structure intact.
Coverage, but at the same time, it's like for American Eagle, it's like we haven't done a raise since January 2023, and that was a hodgepodge with a bunch of retails. Mm-hmm. And if you look at our last 5 raises, 3 with tech, no warrants, no broker fees. The next one was with 3 investors for $8 million, no broker fees, no warrants, and then we did that one with South 32. So, the Canacords, the BMOs of the world are kind of sitting at the sidelines, and they're not getting their piece of the pie. So the institutions are involved.
The institutions want to participate via private placement. They don't want to get sizable bets on the market. I mean, you can do that, but look what happened. We saw yesterday. Look what happens when an institution comes in. You move the market, right? So they like to, the traditional way is to participate in private placement. And honestly, QC or XXX has been so well financed that it hasn't had the need to do these financings. And the same with AE. AE got its start with the financing from an internal. OrCap financed it, got its discovery drill hole, and then we bootstrapped it, and then developed some relationships with some key guys in Vancouver, and then Tech and South 32. So it has been a bootstrap sort of thing, and that's how I've come up, is just sort of making it happen. And there's no formula. It's what works. If it's smart. Try it. We don't need to follow the dogma rules of the industry. However, I think it certainly does take you to the next level to get the big institutions in there.
So an exciting year for both companies at NAC. A huge, drill program, phase 3 or phase 4 drill program, fully funded for the next 2-3 years. Large. Program at the Thierry project, including a big IP program, which will be interesting to see the results of that, see what lights up at depth. I guess final question, and we'll call it a conversation for the day, is just sort of like the capital markets in Canada. There's a lot of negative conversation about the capital markets in Canada. The flow through tax rates increased last year. It seemed to have a negative impact on the sector. What changes or improvements can be made with the new administration, saying that there will be a new administration coming in here in 2025 to improve capital markets in Canada?
Get out of the way. I'm a very much a free market guy. Less regulation, responsible resource development. Just less regulation. Let the free markets determine where true value is. Allow us to permit projects responsibly and reasonably and within a reasonable time frame. Take away the black box element of permitting. Let us know the rules of the game and let money decide if it wants to take that risk based on those rules. So it's really about deregulation, and if we do have a new regime, if it is the Conservative government, and who knows where it goes, their rhetoric, and I'll believe it when I see it, but their rhetoric certainly is, let's get back to business. Deregulation. Deregulation is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that we want to do things destructively or we don't care about fresh water and clean air for our children. That's ridiculous. We all want that. It's about doing business and creating economic development and not being so reliant on the state to make decisions. Because I think free market makes pretty wise decisions over long. They make mistakes, but so does the state. There is no perfect decision. So look, I hope they I'm not saying eliminate regulations, but let us get back to doing good business. Flow through is a wonderful thing. I mean, they always threaten about it. They just make it permanent. Every year you have the PDAC saying, oh, they're threatening. This is ridiculous. But flow through has made Canada what it is historically, going back to the late 70s or early 80s.
That's the reason why the capital markets are here in Vancouver. I mean, that's why the Vancouver Stock Exchange was the place for mining, in the world, is because of flow through financings.
And then the last thing is build that infrastructure. Okay, if I want government interference in one way more than anything else, build those roads, build the rail, open up the north, allow free markets to go and invest in those areas, and then solve the First Nations conundrum, as I say. Do a fair deal, a clean deal for everybody. They deserve economic benefits for where there are resources, but let's clarify the rules of the game. Not an easy task, probably not something any one administration can do, but let's get rid of the noise, focus on the problems, and get to real solutions.
Steve touched all of it.
Okay. Thank you, guys.